My name is Marcus Lomboy, and I'm currently a student in York University. I'm 21 years old, and I'm just applying next year for the concurrent education program to teach high school in the future, where I'll be teaching social sciences and English. I think my first poem was just because I had a crush on a girl. It was just really cheesy. It was like, I think the first line was like, "If loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right." And then I just kept writing at that point, but I never told anyone that I wrote poetry. And in grade 9 and 10 and 11, I just kept writing, and in grade 12, me and my friends started an open mic at our high school. And that was the first time I ever performed my poetry in front of people. So that was my first, I guess, foray into spoken word poetry. And because of that, I kind of gained the confidence and gained more purpose in why I write, because after that performance, I had people going up to me and saying, "Wow, I never knew anyone felt like that. I never knew like someone was going through the same things. I always felt like I was alone," and all of a sudden, because of that, it felt so connected, and they felt so much better about it, because all of a sudden, like, they had someone else, like they knew they weren't the only ones going through that. I would describe spoken word as performance poetry. It's a more urban style of poetry where it's not as structured, it's not as formal, where it's more about getting your story out there. I've always seen like spoken word as more of being able to tell our stories ourselves, like being able to give voice to our words, because most people read poetry and they see all this structure, they see all this crazy diction, and they think to themselves, "Wow, this is so boring," because like it's just like so traditional, so confined to these spaces. To me, that's the exact opposite of what poetry should be doing, because it should be free. It should allow us to really express ourselves the best way we can, and I feel that spoken word does do that.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a poem that I wrote about smoking, because in my life, smoking's been pretty prevalent, because my dad's been smoking like my entire life. And I've always found it so unappealing. I've always thought of all the like dangers associated with it, and like eventually it caught up to him, and then that was such a big like struggle that our family was dealing with at the time, because it's like we didn't know if he was going to be okay, we didn't know what would happen in the future. And in my like it's always something like really personal to me, because I've always thought about my dad smoking and how like, why does anybody smoke at all, and like all the stress that it put on our family. So I thought about just putting a poem to that story. When I was little, my father must have looked like an ancient machine, an iron fist and smoke flowing through his lips like his lungs were on fire. My father has been smoking for as long as I can remember. And it's the memory that shines the brightest, the most constant, that lit tip flaring like stars, and all the lighters I would find around the house was a mystery novel, unfolding the way origami cranes flap their wings, and here I was, trying to figure out where this would lead. We ended up in the hospital. You lying in bed, dressed in that gown, machines beeping, speaking to me in Morse code while I sat beside your bed. A dozen doctor visits that told us exactly the same thing we've been warning you of all these years, and still, you wouldn't let go. Wouldn't lighten your hold on these packs of poison even when you promised you would stop. We all knew you couldn't. I guess it's a strange addiction when you keep paying to kill yourself after your family has begged you to stop. I guess that's how all drugs work. But you taught me through all of that there is poetry in our mistakes, the way the smoke curls in crescendos around those memories, trying their hardest to erase the past and make up for all the nicotine that seemed so important to you all those years ago. I just wish I had more of those memories instead of these memories of an ancient machine. On most days, I can't help but feel useless. And I only only have empty words that comfort as much as rusted guillotines when I have nothing to say, like the day my friend told me she thought love would never find a home in her embrace because of how she looked. That nothing beautiful has ever jumped out at her while she was looking in the mirror. Another friend said that some days she dreaded seeing the sunrise, wondered if opening her eyes to greet the sun good morning was even worth it. Another friend said she felt like nothing but a pile of broken pieces they've TP'd high enough that compliments to set fire to. So tell me, why are there so many broken women trying to jigsaw their insecurities together at such an early age, looking for a reason to love the reflections in the cracked mirrors in the eyes of strangers before they know their own worth, when their mind is Miss Universe, just waiting for the chance to shine proudly? And broken boys with spines that look way too much like cracking foundations, from trying to wear a generation's expectations like shoes that never quite grew into. Child soldiers with all their paper-mache masculinity, trying to step into their combat boots like all these brand names were bulletproof. We are waging a war with ourselves, and sometimes I can't manage to piece together an apology for stray bullets and shrapnel wounds, and it kills me. When my best friend told me he often thinks about killing himself, not because he'll ever do it, that he likes the idea of being able to decide when and how he'll die, thinking this is the world we live in where suicide is synonymous with salvation. I'm just trying to find something other than myself I can really believe in, and sometimes I'm not even one of those things. I've spent way too many friendships standing on sidewalks with empty pockets and handfuls of broken promises, trying to hug the rain, asking for forgiveness, and I just want to tell them feeling alone is not foreign to me. So I've spent most of my life trying to figure out how to hold my own pieces properly, and I've tried to learn empathy, learn understanding, learn all the different ways to convince a broken soul that tomorrow always tastes better after you get the bitter taste of yesterday out of your mouth. So tell me again, why? So many broken boys and women weeping for a chance to be happy, and I'm the one handing out hope here. But in all honesty, I don't even know how to be loved yet. But I learned to love you before I learned to love myself, just so when I do, I can really love myself, even when I had nothing left to give, hoping that one day I'd be able to write a poem honest enough to tell someone that they're not alone without feeling like I'm just giving them reassurances, tattooed with expiry dates on their shoulder blades, right where their wings were supposed to grow, and now I'm just surrounded by all of these broken angels that forgot how to fly. And some days, I still feel useless. Trying to change that. I'm trying.
My name's Osama Sadiq, and I'm currently a high school student at Middlefield Collegiate, and I'm a spoken word artist. I've been rapping since from grade 4 to around grade 9, and my sister actually introduced me to Def Jam poetry, and when I started listening to these poets, like Rudy Francisco, Joshua Bennett, I felt like they were expressing more than the rappers I was listening to. Everything they said meant more to me. So I tried writing a few poems, and when I wrote a few poems, I felt like it was taking a lot of stress off, everything that was currently happening in my life, and I decided to, write a few poems, and I started competing with them and started performing more, and yeah. She was suicidal, mindful of her obsession, stressing whenever the space between her fingers was empty because her mind despised the notion of peace. See, she never cut her wrists, never pressed pistols onto her temple, but she smelled like a chimney. Both her relationships and family burned out quickly. Her life was 2/3 smoke and 1/3 whiskey. She was filthy, but the guilt never really settled inside, and I still remember the gluttony in her weary eyes, the tremor in her fingers, the day she pulled out a pack of Camels Unfiltered and said, I haven't had one for a week. But she reeked of addiction, and yet I nodded like a coward and watched her imprison her ambitions into 4 inches that murdered 4 minutes of her life. I just stood there, watched the ulcers feast on her self-esteem as she inhaled Irish folklore until her lungs wailed like a banshee, until she could no longer see herself fit to be a friend, but the cataract wasn't the only thing blinding her. See, her eyes lit up like flames at the sight of smoke. Her cravings remained untamed. Habits bound her body like chains, stifling the passion in her veins. It's only a game, until your skin becomes a catafalque, until every puff becomes a hearse being forced down your throat, and the drag of smoke mocks your soul, until a pack of Hilton becomes your keeper. I told her this is dying without reason. This is you committing treason against your own body. This is suicide.